Hi everyone. Well, I decided today I would talk about COVID-19 and some of the results. What are we looking at and what are we looking for in the future? So that's kind of where I'm starting. And then I want to talk a little bit about building resilience. So hopefully I'll do the bad news first and then talk about how to continue to build resilience. So there's two questions basically on people's minds right now is number one, when will the pandemic end? And number two is when will this country get back to normal? When will life become normal again? So entirely suppressing coronavirus is an ideal. Probably not a realistic goal in its entirety. At some point though, society is going to need to start moving forward again. In the military, a commander will actually calculate acceptable losses. So that means, they'll look at the benefits to the mission and weigh them against the expected losses of some soldiers. They know some will die. That's a trade-off, and trade-offs are inevitable in life. That's a reality, and it's one we don't like to think about, especially when we live in a culture that has really tried to mitigate any kind of pain, emotional, physical pain. We are really a society that has, for the large part, wanted to remain pain-free. Also realistic expectation, but think about speed limits. Our culture, our laws have certain laws for speeding, for how fast you can go on certain roads. If we designated all roads with a speed limit of 30 kilometers or 40 kilometers or 50 kilometers an hour, and that was even applied to highway driving, we would have a huge problem. So what happens is that looks at the mitigated risk. So if there is, the risk at 100 kilometers on a 400 series highway is evaluated with the need to travel quickly. And those are kind of the things we have to acknowledge. So there will be some risk in moving forward. That's life. But right now, 5.4 million people in Canada have already applied for, and many are already drawing the $2,000 personal response benefit. And that is more than half of the country's labor force. So that we need to understand the percentages. Factories and construction sites, some of them are open, most are closed. Meat processing plants are closing. That means that meat being delivered to grocery stores is going to start, you're going to see your shelves not being stocked. The freezers, so the fridges, refrigerators are not going to be stocked with new produce. So non-essentials are shut down. Essential services have gained new recognition because we always put so much emphasis on non-essentials in our culture because we're a culture that has been focused on how well we can be entertained. It's all about entertainment, and we've done that with our children. How do we entertain our children? In fact, we talk about that, and we see a lot of young parents, particularly, they gauge their lives around how to entertain their children. This is going to stop because we are headed into something that we have never experienced before in our generations, those that are certainly 50 and over, even 60 and over. And household debt is going to complicate Canadians' recovery. 1 in 10 mortgages are now in deferral process. And in an 18-month quarantine, which is what our Prime Minister is suggesting, I'm thinking this doesn't look like recession. I think it will look more like depression. So how do we cope? What do we do? Well, I think we need to understand that we have to start preparing now. It would have been good if we could have prepared 5 years ago, but we didn't. And most of us are ill prepared. So the first thing I think we need to do is look at the past. Start preparing now, look at the past. And one of the things that I would suggest is that we need to really look at what it will mean to do with less. If we can start now living with less, we'll be building some resilience. So let's talk about resilience. Oh, first of all, too, I wanted to say, you need to talk to your grandparents. Now, my grandparents aren't alive, but I have two moms, my mother and my mother-in-law, and they were through the Depression. Now, my mom, I think, toward the end of it, but you know what? They've had hard times. For me, I grew up with an outhouse, one room, and guess what? That built resilience in my life. I have more preparation in many areas than a lot of people in this country. Now, I hope I don't have to go to the outhouse, hope we don't have to do that, but doing with little has been part of my experience. And I want to say to you that many people who have immigrated to this country have experienced little. They're going to have far more resilience. So resilience is the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, face of trauma, tragedy, threats, which this is threatening, or significant sources of stress. So it's adapting well. That's why we need to start adapting now. It also means adapting well in the stressful relationships of life with your family and relationship problems. And for sure, what we're seeing and will increase is that there are going to be more of those problems because now we are isolated with one another. And most of us have not spent a lot of time with each other or with our young children because we've taken them to daycares. We have, as moms and dads, gone to work, both parents working. We're in a different era, folks. And we're going to have to learn some of the lessons from the past. So resilience is a process of adapting well, even when there's relationship problems, health problems, workplace and financial problems. So adapting well, and so developing resilience is a personal journey. And so I want to say to you, to those of you who have journeyed through periods of hardship, like I said before, your resilience level will actually be far greater than those, particularly the younger generation, who have not known any hardship. And we've done them a great disservice, as I said, because we've literally isolated our children, protected our children from experiencing hardships of any kind. And so it's going to be a bit harder for them, but we can teach them. Resilient people are also very adept at seeing things from the other person's perspective. So we need to start learning these skills now. How do you do that? Well, you listen more, and in our families, that's really going to be important. So resilience is all about adaptability. And one of the phrases that I've been taught a few years ago that I love is that we need to remain flexible, adaptable, and teachable. And I would say to you, that's probably one of the greatest contributors to resilience. Remain flexible, adaptable, and teachable. We have to stop complaining, folks. We need to start looking at what can we be grateful for today. What can we be grateful about? And you know, when you're flexible and adaptable to new circumstances and you're able to adapt quickly, then you're going to learn to thrive. You're going to learn to thrive in those places of constant change. I love this with my husband. I'm a person, and maybe it's because of my background, that has no problem with change. I actually like it. My husband, on the other hand, not so much. He sells real estate. He's also a farmer, lived on the family farm since his birth until he was 50 years old. And at that point, our children were growing. Most had moved out of the house except for one. and we decided to build across the road. Yep, we did. We built a house across the road that actually was much bigger than our small house, and it was small. And that was because we thought, well, we're going to have grandchildren. And yes, we do. We have now 11 grandchildren. And so when they all come home, we have space for them. It's wonderful. But Bob has difficulty with change. So what the joke is in our house is that in 50 years, he moved 300 feet. He loves other people to buy and sell, but he moved 300 feet. So I said to him, honey, tortoises move faster than you. So he's learning to adapt to some new changes. Actually, he's very flexible, so that's a great skill that he has, but that's our little joke. You know, most importantly with resilience, it's in the mind. So here you go. How do you change your thinking? Well, most people who are very resilient expect to bounce back after things have been difficult. They feel confident that change will come and that it will happen when it happens. We can't determine when things will get better, but there is a confidence. And I want to say for Christian believers and those even of other faiths, this is something that we hold a deep belief about, that things will get better. And even for those of us who will not see things really return to normal within our lifespan, perhaps, we still believe that we will have a better life because we have an eternal life to think about. Anyways, back to resilience. Another issue is having a victor mentality versus a survivor mentality. So that means that those of us who see life through these dark glasses and a cup half empty will tend to think about their victimization, and they will have a sense of a survivor mentality. But I would challenge you to think about a victorious mentality, that you are going to survive this and that you can thrive through this. It will take great adaptation and new coping skills, but you can do that. And so I encourage you to start today. Start thinking about what you might need to put in place over these next 3 to 6 months. What do you need to put in place for your life? And I'm not suggesting hoarding, I'm suggesting minimal living, because that will help you tremendously. Start thinking, and lots of people are already doing this. I see people are baking bread, they're going back to their mom's recipes. Yeah, good for you, kudos, because we're going to need all of those things in the future. So we need to learn how to manage risk. We need to develop competence in managing risk in our life. And that will develop resilience to the shock and stress that may be ahead of us. It bodes well for all of life. So manage risk. That means prepare well. Think about what you may have to do. And think about how you can help others, because I'm telling you, when you want to build resilience, part of it is giving to others, because that is part of the feeling of well-being for yourself, and that together we will get through this. Thank you so much for listening.